You didn't choose your cat. Let's get that straight right now. Somewhere around 10,000 years ago, in a village in the Near East, a wild animal with claws and night vision looked at a human settlement full of mice and made a decision. I live here now. Nobody tamed it. Nobody trained it. It wasn't like the dog, dragged into human life over thousands of years, or the cow or the horse. The cat walked in on its own terms, and it has never once, in 10,000 years, let us forget that it's doing us a favor by staying. Here's the thing nobody tells you about cats. Every other animal we live with was our idea. We looked at wolves and thought, those could hunt with us. We looked at wild cattle and thought, those could feed us. We looked at horses and thought, those could carry us. In every single case, humans made the first move. We saw something useful, and we went and got it. We captured it, bred it, shaped it over hundreds of generations into something that served us. The cat is the one exception, the one animal in the entire history of human domestication that essentially domesticated itself. And once you understand how it happened, you'll never look at that smug little face on your couch the same way again. Let's go back, way back, to the moment everything changed, not just for cats, but for humans too. Around 12,000 years ago, in a region we now call the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Israel, that whole stretch, something happened that rewrote the entire human story. People stopped wandering. For hundreds of thousands of years before this, humans had been nomads. You followed the food. When the herds moved, you moved. When the season turned, you packed up whatever you could carry and you walked. Nobody stayed anywhere. Nobody could. And then somebody figured out farming. Suddenly you didn't have to chase your food. You could plant it. You could grow it right where you stood. And for the first time in human history, people started staying in one place, building permanent homes, permanent villages. But here's the part they don't put in the textbooks. When you grow grain, you don't eat all of it at once. You store it. You keep it for the winter, for the lean times, for when the next harvest fails. And for the first time ever, humans created something that had never existed on this planet before. A giant, concentrated, reliable pile of food that just sat there. And you know what loves a giant, concentrated, reliable pile of food? Mice. Mice showed up almost immediately. We actually have evidence of house mice thriving in early human settlements going back as far as 15,000 years. Even before full farming, in the villages of a people called the Natufians. Wherever humans stored food, mice came, in enormous numbers, breeding, eating, ruining grain, spreading disease. The first pest problem in human history, and we had absolutely no way to deal with it. We'd accidentally built the greatest mouse buffet the world had ever seen. And that right there, is the moment the cat enters the story, not because we invited it, because we set the table. Out in the scrubland around these villages lived a creature called Felis sylvestris libica, the African wildcat, the Near Eastern wildcat. This is the ancestor of every house cat alive today. That ball of fluff sleeping on your laundry right now descended directly from this animal. And the wildcat was not friendly. Let me be clear about that. These were not cuddly creatures waiting for a human to love them. They were solitary, territorial, aggressive little predators that wanted absolutely nothing to do with people. If you tried to pick one up, it would remove your face. But the wildcat had one weakness. It was hungry, and out there at the edge of this new human village was a food source so rich, so easy, so absurdly abundant, that even a deeply antisocial murder machine couldn't ignore it. All those mice. So the boldest wildcats, the ones just slightly less terrified of humans than the rest, started creeping in at night, picking off mice around the grain stores. And here's what makes cats different from every other domesticated animal. Nobody had to catch them, nobody had to cage them, nobody had to force anything. The cats came on their own, because it was worth their while. Now put yourself in the sandals of an early farmer. You've got a granary full of food that's constantly being raided by mice. It's a genuine crisis. This is your survival, your family's survival, sitting in that grain. And then you notice something. There's this cat hanging around, and wherever the cat is, the mice disappear. You're not going to chase that cat away. Are you kidding? You're going to do everything you can to make it stay. Maybe you toss it some scraps. Maybe you leave it alone and let it do its thing. Either way, you've now got a working relationship with an animal you never asked for. and never captured. The cat gets an endless supply of mice. You get a granary that isn't being destroyed. Nobody signed anything. Nobody planned it. It just worked for both sides. Scientists have a name for this. They call it the cat's self-domestication, because unlike literally every other domestic animal, the cat wasn't shaped by human choice. It was shaped by opportunity. The cats that could tolerate being near humans ate better, survived better, had more kittens, and those kittens were a little more tolerant still, and their kittens more tolerant again. Generation after generation, the cats got friendlier, not because we bred them to be, but because friendliness happened to pay. For a long time, that was the whole story we thought we knew. Cats hung around Egyptian grain stores, got worshipped as gods, all of that. The assumption was that Egypt, about 4,000 years ago, was where the whole thing started, and then they found the grave. In 2004, on the island of Cyprus, a team of French archaeologists led by a researcher named Jean-Denis Vien uncovered something at a Neolithic site called Shilla Rocambos. It was a human burial, a person laid to rest around 9,500 years ago, surrounded by offerings, polished stone tools, seashells, ochre. This was someone who mattered, someone the village had cared about. And buried right next to them, about a foot away, deliberately positioned, was a cat. Now this stopped everybody cold, because 9,500 years ago is more than 4,000 years before Egypt. This pushed the entire human-cat relationship back by millennia in a single discovery. But it wasn't just the age that got people, it was the details. The cat hadn't been eaten. Its bones showed no cut marks, no signs of butchering. It hadn't been sacrificed in some ritual. It was laid out carefully, intact, its body positioned to face the human. The two of them, human and cat, buried looking at each other, surrounded by carved seashells. And here's the kicker. Cats aren't even native to Cyprus. There were no wild cats on that island, which means somebody, some human, nearly 10,000 years ago, had put a cat on a boat and carried it across open sea to get there. You don't do that for a pest control tool. You don't load a wild animal onto a wooden boat and cross the Mediterranean because it's mildly useful. You do that for something you're not willing to leave behind. Somebody 9,500 years ago loved a cat enough to bring it across the sea, and when that person died, the village made sure the two of them stayed together, facing each other, for nearly 10,000 years, until a team of archaeologists brushed the dirt away and found them exactly as they'd been left. That's the oldest evidence we have of the bond, not the usefulness, the bond. And it turns out that little grave on Cyprus was pointing at something the science would only confirm much later, because when researchers started analyzing cat DNA, modern cats, ancient cat remains, wild cats from all over, they found the modern house cat traces back to exactly this region, the Near East, the Fertile Crescent, the same place, the same time as the birth of farming. The cat and the granary were born together. One created the other. Some researchers even found cat bones at these ancient sites with chemical signatures showing the cats had been eating the mice that ate the grain, proving the whole system, the human-mouse-cat triangle, was really happening. And one jawbone showed a cat that had lived past 6 years old, which was genuinely old for the time. That cat survived that long because humans were looking after it, feeding it, keeping it around long after its mousing days were probably behind it. They weren't just tolerating the cat anymore, they were caring for it. Now let's talk about Egypt, because this is where the cat went from useful houseguest to actual god, and where the story takes a genuinely dark turn that almost nobody knows about. By around 4,000 years ago, cats had spread from the Near East down into the Nile Valley, and the Egyptians absolutely lost their minds over them. And you can kind of see why. Egypt was an agricultural superpower, vast grain stores feeding an entire civilization, which meant vast quantities of mice and rats, which meant cats were worth more than gold. A cat protecting a granary in Egypt was protecting the food supply of an empire. So the Egyptians did what humans do with things they can't live without. They made it sacred. Cats became associated with the goddess Bastet, protector of the home, of fertility, of family. Killing a cat in ancient Egypt, even by accident, could get you executed. There are accounts, possibly exaggerated but telling, of Egyptians running back into burning buildings to save the cats before the people. Family cat died naturally, the household would go into mourning, and some would shave off their own eyebrows as a sign of grief. That's how far it had come. From a wild animal picking mice off a grain pile, to a creature so revered that people mutilated their own faces when one died. But here's the part that gets left out of the cute version of this story. The Egyptians didn't just worship cats, they also killed them by the millions. Archaeologists have uncovered cat cemeteries in Egypt containing hundreds of thousands of mummified cats, and when they examined the remains, they found something disturbing. Most of these cats were young. Many had died from a broken neck or a crushed skull. These weren't beloved pets who died of old age. They were bred, in enormous numbers, specifically to be killed, mummified, and sold to worshippers as offerings to the gods. It was an industry. A massive, organized, religious industry built on breeding cats just to sacrifice them. And here's where it gets strange. Some researchers, including an evolutionary biologist at Oxford named Gregor Larson, have suggested this might have actually accelerated cat domestication. Think about it. To run that kind of operation, you need huge numbers of cats being packed together, tolerating humans, tolerating confinement, breeding on demand. The cats that could handle that, the calm ones, the docile ones, the ones that didn't panic in close quarters, those were the ones that thrived in the temple breeding grounds. Larson half-jokingly calls it the murder pathway to domestication. The grim possibility that part of what made cats tame enough to live in our homes was thousands of years of us breeding them for sacrifice. Not everyone agrees with this. Plenty of researchers think the grin and the mice explain everything on their own. But it's a haunting thought that the soft, purring animal in your lap might carry, somewhere deep in its history, the fingerprints of one of the strangest and darkest chapters in the human-animal story. But the cat survived all of it. The mice, the grain, the worship, the temples, the sacrifice. It rode along with humans as we spread across the world onto ships, because sailors needed cats to protect their food stores from rats on long voyages. In medieval times, it was actually mandatory for seafarers to carry cats on board. The cat literally sailed around the entire planet as humanity's tiny, indifferent pest control department, and it colonized every continent we colonized, riding in the cargo hold, doing its job, asking for nothing but the occasional fish head. That's how the cat conquered the world, not by being loyal, not by being obedient, by being useful enough to keep around and independent enough to never actually need us. So let's talk about what this actually means, because there's a reason cats feel so different from dogs, and it's not personality, it's history. Dogs were domesticated the hard way. Over tens of thousands of years, humans selected wolves for loyalty, for obedience, for the desire to please. We shaped them deliberately into animals that live to make us happy. A dog looks at you and genuinely wants your approval. That's not an accident. That's thousands of years of us breeding it in on purpose. The cat went through none of that. Nobody ever bred cats to obey. Nobody selected them for loyalty. The only thing evolution ever asked of the cat was, can you stand to be around humans without trying to kill them? That's it. That's the entire bar the cat had to tolerate people, don't flee. Everything else, the aloofness, the independence, the way your cat looks at you like you're a roommate it hasn't fully decided about, all of that stayed exactly as it was in the wild. Your cat is, genetically, barely different from that wild animal crouched at the edge of the village 10,000 years ago. Dogs have been transformed almost beyond recognition from wolves. Cats have barely changed at all. The thing on your couch is basically a wild predator that has agreed, provisionally, to hang out. And this is why your cat acts the way it does. It doesn't come when you call because it was never bred to. It doesn't live to please you because pleasing you was never part of the deal. The deal, from the very beginning, was simple and mutual and entirely on the cat's terms. I'll stay if it's worth my while. I'll tolerate you if you're useful to me. And the second that stops being true, I reserve the right to walk out the door and never look back. That's not the cat being cold. That's the cat being honest. It's running the exact same arrangement its ancestors ran 10,000 years ago at the edge of that first village. Nothing about the contract has changed. We just started calling it a pet somewhere along the way and pretending we were in charge. Here's what I want you to sit with. Every time your cat ignores you, knocks something off a table while maintaining eye contact, or decides at 3 a.m. that now is the time to sprint across your face, you're not dealing with a badly behaved pet. You're dealing with a wild animal that walked into human civilization of its own free will 10,000 years ago and negotiated terms that have never once been renegotiated. We didn't tame the cat, not really. We built villages and we filled them with food, and we accidentally created a world so convenient that a wild predator decided to move in. And in exchange for the mice, and later for the warmth, and later still for whatever it is cats actually get out of us, it agreed to share our homes, but it never agreed to belong to us. That part we made up. The person buried on Cyprus 9,500 years ago understood something we've kind of forgotten. That the relationship between humans and cats was never about ownership. It was about two very different animals figuring out they were better off together than apart. A person and a cat lay to rest facing each other, surrounded by seashells, because somewhere in there, underneath the mice and the grain and the mutual convenience, there was something real. Something that made a human carry a wild animal across the sea rather than leave it behind. So no, you didn't choose your cat. 10,000 years ago, your cat's ancestor chose us, and every cat since has simply been renewing the lease. The mice are mostly gone now, the granaries are gone, but the cat's still here, on your couch, in your bed, staring at you with those same eyes that watched the first human village from the dark, still deciding, every single day, whether we're worth sticking around for. Fade it well, see you in the next one.